the next person in the waiting room. And let's get this party started. I just wanted to welcome everybody to our conversation tonight, Cooped Up, about navigating the challenges that couples are facing during COVID. I am thrilled to have Avrum Nadigel with me tonight. Avrum is an author, a speaker, a relationship therapist, and he's somebody who makes my brain dance with all sorts of really interesting ideas and frameworks and new perspectives. So I'm so excited to be talking to you tonight about this topic, which is complicated and requires some new thoughts even after all this time. We're hoping to spend about 45 minutes to an hour, including questions and answers. We really hope that you will send some questions on the Instagram and on the Zoom chat, and we will do our best to answer those. I will do my best to manage seeing them so that we can answer them. Welcome. We're really glad that you're here. One of the things that we thought about in terms of trying to give a general introduction is to go through some of the general challenges that face us at each stage. So there are couples who are newlywed, couples who, you know, are just getting together and just, you know, all they thought about was being alone together and finally getting married and setting up shop. And now here they are alone together and setting up shop with really very little by way of distraction. So that's one challenge. Couples who are perhaps married even longer than that, but still alone in the house together, perhaps some of the challenges of infertility at this time as well. So there can be additional stress. And again, the loss of support for a couple sort of carrying it all on their thin shoulders. That's one stage we want to talk about. The second is, you know, couples with young families, having young children at home, parents trying to work, trying to manage school, trying to get back to elementary school, but in the digital age, and what that means for us as a couple and as a family. Then we wanted to talk briefly about, let's say, older kids, teens, where there's no privacy. You know, at least with young kids, they go to sleep at 8:30, at 9:30, at 10:30. You know, I'm living with two teens and they never go to sleep, certainly not before I do. And there's no escape really from the angst of teenagehood. So that's something that I would love to discuss. And then the people with older kids who have maybe moved out, people who are lonely for their grandchildren, people who are lonely for the activities that they worked so hard all their lives to enjoy and have pleasure from, and now they're sort of sitting looking at each other in a way that is not what they hoped, not what they dreamed, not what they, you know, not what they planned for. So that's sort of the format. I wanted to go through some of the challenges that each of those couples faces, and then we have we are really, I'm so excited that Avrum has prepared a cheat sheet for us, the 7 secret habits of highly successful couples. And I'd love to go through that with you and get some practical ideas. How is it that some couples are managing to thrive? What's that tip that might help you? If it doesn't change your life, it still might help you get through a few days, and that's worth something too. And we absolutely want to take your questions, your concerns, your thoughts. You know, where is it that you're seeing challenges, and how can we think about those challenges and talk about those challenges and bring them out into the light? So, Avrum, do you have any general introduction that you want to give, or should we dive into the first scenario or the first subset? What makes sense for you?
Let's just dive in. Let's go.
Okay. So let's imagine that I am a newlywed, and despite Corona, despite all the changes to my plans, despite all the ups and downs of being engaged, and finally I'm married, and here I am, and I'm alone with this partner, this man or this woman who I love so much, and I'm trying to adjust, but it's so intense. You know, I thought this was all I wanted, was just to sit and stare into each other's eyes all day, but I'm finding it's not quite what I imagined. Can you tell us what might be underneath some of that, and what are some of the ways that we can just ease that transition a little bit?
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think first and foremost, I think it's important to, just to recognize that whether you're a new couple, whether you started a new business, whether you have a new baby, whether you're grandparents for the first time, there's something very novel about what we're going through right now. Something that we can't even turn to our grandparents and ask them, can you share some of your wisdom about the last coronavirus or the last lockdown of 10 weeks, 11 weeks that you've been through? And while that's sort of, if you're a historian, it's kind of fascinating. If you're an epidemiologist, it's sort of fascinating perhaps. But for the rest of us, we're sort of making it up as we go along. And I think that just knowing that we are all woven together by this sort of shared global experience should humble people with respect to the stress that everyone possibly could be going through. Now, I have to be clear. This isn't true for everyone. I think that we assume that we're all going through a shared experience in the same way, and that's just not true. Um, I think that in some ways, there are so many variables that could stress out one couple that won't stress out another couple. For example, the clients that I work with, if you have teenagers and they're more or less self-sufficient, and you can throw them on Zoom or whatever they're doing for the remote learning all day, it's a machaya. Like you get a bit of a break. Like your kids are on Zoom, right? You know where they are. They're not dealing drugs in the back of a high school. It's like, great. Okay, I know. They're right in my living room. Everything's great, right? If you have a 3-year-old and you're spending your whole day chasing after them so they don't swallow Lego, that's exhausting by about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. For newlyweds, it sort of depends. If you're a newlywed and you didn't know anything about coronavirus, so let's say your wedding was what? What would you say? If your wedding was in April, all of a sudden, all of your dreams, your childhood dreams about what kind of wedding you're going to have, and it's all been turned over on its head. And that really is something that's going to take a certain amount of adjusting. I think mature couples will handle this with humor and with grace and with elasticity, and it'll be part of the gestalt of their experience. They'll share it with their kids one day. For couples who are very wed to a certain idea of what a wedding is, what a first date is supposed to be, they're going to have a tougher time with this because, and again, this is true for opening a new business or starting a new marriage. Whenever you get wed to a certain narrative because it has to be this way for a certain reason, and then life comes along and throws you a curveball, you're going to have a much greater challenge adjusting to this new normal. So on the one hand, shared experience. On the other hand, I think the newlyweds who are more mature, who have a sense of humor about this, will make the best of it, and other people will struggle.
Can I pick up on something that you said, that the idea of mature, it really strikes me, because you're talking about couples being mature and immature in their responses, not good and bad. It's not good couples respond well and bad couples make a mess of it. It's all of us doing the best we can with the tools we have, and all of us can actually grow up. Each of us can grow up in our relationship. We can grow up in our marriage. We can grow up even with respect to ourselves and handle things differently than we have. And that's part of what the tips are about, is helping ourselves become more mature, become more grown up. And it really struck me that we're not talking about couples who are better or worse. We're talking about couples with more or fewer tools. We're talking about couples with more or fewer resources. And I think that's really important to remember. It certainly shifted my thinking a little bit. I sort of feel like I'm at home and I can't handle it, so I'm a bad mother, a bad spouse, a bad, corona survivor. But I love the idea of maturity, because we're all getting more mature every year, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention that I'm standing on the shoulder of giants here. This comes from the world of family systems theory, where there isn't healthy unhealthy. It's one of the things, Rivka, that drives me crazy with Bell's Mental Health Week, where there's this idea that there's mentally healthy people and there's mentally sick people, and it drives me crazy. The truth is, every single one of us, you, me, your husband, my wife, who's a psychiatrist, we're all on a continuum. It's a continuum based on the multi-generational layers of what we've inherited from our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents, and all of that sort of cocktail mix of, you know, neurochemistry and psychology and trauma, and so we all have inherited a certain amount of maturity, or you can say, you know, anxiety. And you know, in the Muslim tradition, they talk about a derech, you know, sort of the path that you have. We all have a path. And our path is a certain amount of maturity we've inherited from our families, that inherited from their families. So there's no blame. There's no one that did something wrong. You know, I have a certain disposition when I get anxious. And it's been predictable since I've been like 12. Nothing has changed all that much except for my own growth. But it's not like I get anxious in a very fundamental way at 51. I get anxious and I kind of worry about the same things that I've always more or less have worried about. And my wife, I think, would say the same thing. And so as I see it, coronavirus and what we're going through right now has exposed some chronic issues that people just, you know, weren't aware of. And I could tell you for some of my clients, they see this as an opportunity to sort of manage some of that immaturity they have within themselves that sort of was managed pre-coronavirus with busy at work or busy at the gym, or you got your vocation, you got your hobby. Now you're all at home and you have to manage all of that togetherness in a certain way without distraction. And it's a real challenge for people. Some rise to the occasion, and unfortunately, and we're hearing this more and more, we could talk about this later, at the beginning of coronavirus, domestic violence was down, suicide was down, things are starting to change now. It happened but a couple of weeks ago in the States anyways. I don't know if the stats are in Canada, but as things get more chronic, families buckle, marriages buckle, resources are less, and you can see the adults at home are having a tougher time with this the longer this goes.
So let's talk about the adults at home as we move into the next stage, which is the adults at home trying to manage the kids, and how does that interaction affect everybody in terms of, you started talking about anxiety. Are you seeing greater involvement, greater focus, greater, I think you sort of touched on that now we are, we're managing the children in every single arena, in every single area, all the time. And that maybe that applies not only to the people with young kids at home, but also with the teens, right? Where we all benefit, especially the teens, from having a break from their parents, and the parents benefit from having a break from their teens. You know, we're trying to, you know, we're trying to be parents and couples and teachers and, you know, camp counselors. And so what's that like? What's the tension there?
I think you stole that quite. I'm not sure what to say. I mean, that's
what are the two poles that are creating the tension, I guess, is what I was asking. You know, what are the needs that are in conflict that's creating all of it?
You know, I think what you're touching on, Rivka, is something that we talked about. For those who don't know, Rivka and I talked yesterday in preparation for this talk. What you're talking about is something that we call the two life forces. Depending on how comfortable you are with terminology, in my world, we call it the instinctual life forces. Dr. Bowen called it the instinctual life forces. A baby to a mother's breast is an instinctual force. There is something about, no matter how tired, this isn't true for everyone, but let's say most people, the baby has an instinctual drive to go to the breast to be fed, and the mother, regardless of how tired she is, somehow finds it within herself to give the baby that breast. And at some point, the baby says no, right? And wants to be its own person, wants to put food in its mouth. That drive, that instinctual drive for togetherness and for separation continues throughout life. And I think in the world of therapy, we talk a lot about, or at least self-help books, the togetherness stuff, hugs and compromise and community. And in the Jewish community, especially in the Frum community, everything is it's very community oriented and togetherness. Some people get allergic to that sort of togetherness, and they need more of that differentiated or individuation, that drive to be oneself. And the truth is, from whether you're an old order Amish person, you know, or Bell's Chassid, or you're just a secular, you know, whatever, Wall Street dude, you know, we balance out the togetherness and this a need to be oneself in a whole myriad of ways. But coronavirus, where we're being asked to stay at home, to socially isolate with people that we love under the same roof, there isn't a lot of opportunity to find myself in all of that kind of stuff. And I think you said it quite well. To be a camp counselor, medic, cook, house cleaner, and then, by the way, maybe lawyer. I mean, I'll just give you an example. This is our house. My wife's a psychiatrist. She sees her patients upstairs in the bedroom. I'm a family marriage therapist. I'm in the basement. We're often both seeing clients and patients simultaneously, and then we have our kid. And then when we're not, I'm with the kids. She's with the patient. We have two of our kids on computers. Our 3-year-old is running around. It's, we laugh about it, but we actually say, we were once a metaphoric madhouse. We are literally a madhouse right now with a psychiatrist and a therapist and kids running around. And
you have it on good authority.
Yeah, no, I mean, I work at ChemH. I feel like I am living it quite a bit. And the fact is that during this time, it is very, very important to carve out and to find space for oneself in all of this lockdown. And if you don't because you feel guilty, a lot of them, some of my clients, I apologize if people are insulted or take offense to this, but it's a gender split. The women in my practice generally are more comfortable or want to be more engaged with their kids' schooling. They want to be engaged more with the home. They have less of an allergy to being their own selves. And the men naturally will try to find and will struggle a bit with all of this togetherness. And then there'll be a flip at some point. But in my office, you'll have a young woman who's, let's say, she's also a professional. She's 29 years old. She's 34 years old. And now she has to focus on her career too. And the guy doesn't know how to pivot and become more involved with the kids' schooling. And there's a lot of tension as they're trying to figure this out. They never had to deal with this pre-COVID. Never. And now they do. And the couples that I've noticed in my office that do better with this, again, are the ones who have just internally more resources and a little bit more elasticity to make that shift and then go back and forth between being together with the family and finding one's own self, whether it's going for a walk, going downstairs to work out, reading a book, developing some sort of a hobby, and negotiating that in and out that we just didn't have to do 9 weeks ago. So the tension is real with that.
It's so interesting that it's not, on the one hand it's gendered, on the other hand actually it's not, because it turns out that it's just where you are right now. And right now I'm more involved, then I get burnt out, and then you get more involved, and then you get burnt out. I feel like there's this cycle, which, it's interesting. We're right now in we're in the period of time between Pesach and Shavuot, right? And we're counting. And it's a cycle of counting. It's a cycle of 7 weeks, of 7 days each. And we, I'm a Yoased Halacha, we talk a lot about counting the 7 clean days. And there are all these cycles in Judaism. And sometimes the cycle feels like a rut, but the goal of those cycles really is to be a spiral, is for us to meet, Pesach, to meet the idea of freedom at a different stage than we were last year and the year before, and as a 5-year-old and as an 80-year-old, and I think that's sort of what I'm hearing from you in terms of the couples, where they're starting out in one place and they're cycling around to the next level or to the next experience, and hopefully somewhere in there we don't just go round and round, but we actually become mature. We actually change the way we interact with those experiences so that they become different, right? So that the tensions can somehow meet, or maybe, today the energy is more in this direction, and tomorrow maybe it would be a little bit further to this side. Is that something that you think would help? Like, is it about, acknowledging that the tension is going to be there, and then figuring out where on that continuum you're available to be today.
Oh, my screen just switched. Are you still there?
I am still here.
People playing piano. Okay.
Yes, let me mute this person. Let's see if that helps. Are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think my only comment to what you're putting forward here is the following. One would like to assume or believe that everybody is on a path that's going up. And again, I'm not here. Clearly, you didn't bring me on to talk about hashkafa or halacha, or that's not what I'm. But from my clinical perspective, what I would say is some will, some can't, some will try. I try my best with my clients to not be a cheerleader, to give them the space to do what they can with the tools that they have. I wish I could say everybody is ascending Rivka, but we know in families that's just not true. Some families during this time will regress. There are just some families where their resources are so depleted, and there are so many multiple layers of problems that existed pre-COVID. And we know this is true for business. Not every business is going to survive and innovate. Not every restaurant is going to be able to innovate during this period. So sorry if that's a bit of a Debbie Downer, but I think some will do well, some will struggle.
It's a reality check that we do get stuck in the rut, sometimes for years, right? And it's interesting what you say, like these are underlying conditions that were present before COVID, but COVID has somehow, helped them rise to the surface. Right? These are
and Rivka, by the way, this is true for all nodal events in our lives. It's just that there's something so multi-layered and unique about COVID. It's funny, when you say it out loud, we're sort of used to it now. Like it's almost amazing that we say novel, because it doesn't feel novel to me. Does it feel novel to you, by the way, Rivka, at this point?
You know what? It's funny. I was in the store, or I was trying to talk to somebody, and I realized all of a sudden I'm not 6 feet apart. And you jump back and I thought, like, okay, but 4 weeks of, physical distancing can't erase 4 decades of what I normally do. Mm-hmm. In some ways it does still feel novel. But I'm feeling and seeing and hearing about the burnout from being in this novel situation for so long.
Yeah.
We got a question on Instagram before we move on to the empty nesters. Sure. It's so difficult to have a deep, intimate conversation with no privacy. There's no date nights. There's no, so do we have any tips for finding connection amongst the chaos? I love the way that's connection amongst the chaos. That's what we're looking for.
Sure.
Should we pop over to do you want to answer that off the cuff, or do you want to pop over to the amazing sheet, the tips?
Well, I mean, why not? Well, let's answer the question. So my understanding is the question is, where do you find the time to connect intimately when everybody's on top of each other? Is that the question?
Yes.
The first thing I think that's important to say is that intimacy really can have a wide breadth. It really depends on how you define intimacy. I have found that some of the healthiest couples that I've worked with can find intimacy by sharing the same living room while each spouse is watching a different Netflix show. I have some couples that are so allergic to not doing things together that if they're not watching the same show, sitting on the same couch, eating the same popcorn, that there's something wrong with the marriage. There's something wrong with the marriage. So I think that healthier couples.
Was that you said before about being wedded to an idea?
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, I think that it is a marker of a healthy marriage that it's the space between the notes. We say in music, it's the space between the notes that creates the melody. Otherwise, it's just a mishmash of notes. And so I think, number one, there has to be an understanding that when people are on top of each other for prolonged periods of time, one or both spouses are going to want their alone time. I know we have this idea that we should want to be intimate with each other, but you know what? After you've just been homeschooling or remote learning for 3 hours, and then you're on, 5 Zoom meetings with your work, and your kids are finally in bed, it's now 10 o'clock, You know, one of you might just want to chill out. You don't want to see humans. You might just want to go for a walk by yourself. So the first thing I would say is, you know, couples don't have to check in. You know, it's a funny thing. You know, I got to check in. Most couples have a sense. You know, they're able to. Their mind reading might not always be perfect, but we have a sense when you don't want to be in my presence completely. But if you're not sure, maybe you're a newlywed, you can always say, "Where are you at right now? I wouldn't mind, you know, debriefing the day, or just, you know, sitting down having a drink with you on the couch." And it's a marker of maturity of a married couple to regulate your anxiety if your partner says, "No, I can't, no, not right now." It's the more immature, anxious couples that go, "What? If you love me, if you cared about me, right?" You know, the idea here is that we're all locked down. So the idea of perhaps checking in with each other and saying, "You know, I really would like to sit down with you and talk. You know, I'd like a massage. I'd like whatever the case, whatever it is." And to be okay if your partner can't meet you at that point, but to plant a flag in the ground and say, "How about this? Why don't you go for a walk? Go for a 20-minute walk. Let's meet back at 10:30 before we go to bed, and let's just sit down." You know, it doesn't have to be 3 hours. You know, it could be 5 minutes. Intimacy is defined by the two people that are there, and I wouldn't get too caught up in what you're reading in books or what you're hearing from friends. You know, that's the wonderful thing about marriage. You get to define the parameters of what a meaningful experience is, and it drives me crazy when I hear couples get caught up in the metrics of it all. You know, how many times have we had sex this month? How many times have we gone on date nights? How much conversation? Was it an hour conversation? Because I've heard 90 minutes is the right amount of conversation. You're looking for quality moments, and you know, a 15-minute check-in at the end of the day, just to, you know, here's where I'm at, here's what I'm scared of, here's where I'd like to see the family go, can give you a very powerful 15 minutes. And I know couples that can speak for 2 hours and yammer on, and nothing is really being said. So
Interesting. It's true. We do compare ourselves to, you know, I read in Cosmopolitan magazine while I was standing in line at the grocery store that, you know, 90 minutes, you know, couples who talk for 90 minutes are the happiest, or we must do this, you know, we must go on walks, we must have, you know, and I think you're right. We don't necessarily have the confidence to say, I feel satisfied, I feel we have a close connection, or I don't. And this is to speak our needs, to figure out what it is we actually need so that we can ask for it. It's really hard.
you know,
To me, that's really not an easy thing.
you know, I always ask my clients when they in my office, they'll say something, they'll throw some metric out or some stats, and I'll say, "Where'd you learn that?" 9 times out of 10, they can't answer that question. 9 times out of 10. If I say, let's say a couple says to me, you know, it's important to have 3 date nights a week. And I'll say, "Well, where did you hear that?" 1 to 10 will say, "I heard the speaker," and you know, and even there, by the way, I'll say to them, "And where do you think the speaker got that from? Like, what research, what data, what holy book? Like, where did they get that from?" It is the rare person that really has explored these cultural, you know, things that get passed down, and people get caught up in this. And the other thing I'll say is this. The other thing I hear in my office is people will say, "Why are my spouse and I are fighting so much, but my neighbors, they're not fighting so much. They're really doing better with coronavirus." And what I'll say is, you know, if you're going to compare apples to apples, okay, your neighbors would have to have the same family of origin issues and history that both you and your spouse have. They'll have to have more or less the same age of kids. They'll have to more or less have the same financial. Everything would have to be aligned. So how couple A is handling this lockdown, or how couple B is handling this lockdown, is freaking frack. It doesn't make a difference because of the incredible differences, even though on paper you might look-ish the same. So our challenges and our potential here is completely unique to each couple.
You're right. We do compare, and we compare so selectively, right? So if they're not doing well, then obviously they have every reason, and life is so hard for them. But if they're doing well, it's just because they're better than us, you know. But let's get back to the last scenario, and then I want to get practical with you. So,
Sure.
You know, what about the couples that are, again, back to that stage of being empty nesters? So either it's the couples who are, you know, staring deeply into each other's eyes all day, and still, I liked what you said about asking for space, within the marriage. And now here we are. We've sort of got the hang of this. We've been married for 30, 40 years. And we never really expected to end up, locked down. We can't go to Costco. We can't, it's really hard. It's really stressful, and we maybe are not as great at technology, and we're getting lonely. What kind of thoughts do you have about that?
Well, what's interesting, Rivka, is that's not what I'm hearing in my office, though.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You carpool for me anymore, and then
No. What I'm hearing in my office more often than not is that the empty nesters that thought they were empty nesters have their kids home. This is happening quite a bit. So now, again, empty nest, the way I understand, by definition, empty nest is that, that funny age where, your last child has gone off to university. I'm not talking about, 15 years later when now you're becoming grandparents, because that actually is the grandparents out there are having a really, really tough time. They can't touch their grandkids. They can't see their grandkids. They don't know when they will be. And they're of an age that they're most susceptible to having complications with COVID. So if you really want to talk about a populace that is going through a very rough time with this right now, it's people over the age, I would say, of anywhere between 60 to 75 to 80, where their sort of joie de vivre, their joy, if they have grandkids, is seeing their grandkids. And it breaks my heart. My mom is in Montreal, and I know how hard it is for her. She hasn't seen the kids. She would come in every 6 weeks by train. But my wife's parents live in Toronto. They come over. They stand about 12 feet apart from my kids, and I can see how badly they just want to hug. And my kids want to hug them too. And it breaks your heart because, my older kids get it, my 3-year-old doesn't. And so that's a different subgroup that's going through a tremendous amount of challenge. But I want to come back to the empty nesters. So what I'm hearing, very interesting, their young adult children are moving back home, and some of them are married, for a host of reasons, and they're moving back home. And what I'm hearing in my office is, what the hell is going on? Why are we fighting like we were fighting back when my kids were 12 and 13, 14? Not only us, but my children are fighting. So the siblings who, one's a doctor, one's a filmmaker, and they're fighting like they were fighting because that's all the unfinished business. And we manage unfinished business by moving, by getting jobs. It's still there. It's still underneath. And when everybody comes back together, kind of like a Passover Seder, when everyone comes back and the old fights don't happen. You know what I mean?
It's a good movie.
Yeah, well, every movie has that scene, or the Christmas scene. Everyone, and that old stuff kind of comes to the surface. So what I'm hearing is, how do I manage fighting when my kids are 24 and 26? And what is wrong with our family? That's what I'm hearing in my practice more and more, and no one really could have anticipated that.
Okay, well, I'm ready for some answers. How do I manage fighting when it's a 26-year-old? How do I manage living with my parents when I'm 26? But here we are stuck. Is that something that you have some tips, you have some thoughts about, you have some paradigm shift for my head?
I mean, sometimes the train just has left the station, and you're stuck in a situation that is complex. I mean, not everything is easy with a quick tip. I'll tell you the families who are doing this better. The families who are doing this better are the parents who were very clear with their young adult children, and they said the following: you're more than welcome to come back into this house, but this is not your house. You're more than welcome. Your room is here, but these are the rules, and these are the principles of how Dad and I are managing our affairs right now. And I understand you're an adult, and I understand you have your own life, but if you move back into our house, whatever it is, curfew, who's going to shop, food, stuff. What I often hear those conversations never happen. And you know what, Rivka, people did is we're gonna write out love and a prayer. We're just gonna love because I care and love you. You show me a family or a couple, by the way. Give me a newlywed where they're like, love conquers all, and I'll show you trouble in paradise. Okay? And so when you're not strategic about bringing everybody back under one roof for weeks at a time, you're going to have trouble. And I think what a lot of these families did is that they just thought, oh, you know what? We're just going to ride this out and we'll make it up as we go along.
Well, we thought it would blow over. Nobody thought it was going to be, nobody could have believed that we were going to be living together for 4 months, 6 months. That we don't even know now. Now, at least we can conceive that it might be a long term. But I think, at the beginning, I thought, this will blow over. It'll be fine.
Yeah, no, Rivka, that you're absolutely right. And I would say that's the second point, that we all just have to give each other a break. We have to give our politicians a break. We have to give our clergy a break. We have to give our fundraisers. We have to give the doctors a break. We have to give everybody a break because, Rick, I'll share something with you. I hope my wife doesn't kill me. I don't think she's on the call. She's putting our kids to bed, so I don't think she'll hear this. I was privy to Elisa speaking to her colleagues about a week into coronavirus. She was showing me, just discussion about other female doctors of all stripes, right? OBGYNs and family doctors and psychiatrists, and they were laughing. They were like, oh, I'm going to Mexico. This is ridiculous in China. They didn't know. So if they didn't know, how the hell do you expect your average layperson to know? So all of this stuff, this nonsense of people going retrospect, back in time going, we should have. You're absolutely right. No one could have envisioned 10 weeks in, and also, by the way, talking about, will school even start in the fall? And what's going to happen, by the way, if it doesn't? Have we planned for that? I don't know. So your point is well taken. So I'll just leave it there. It's a good point.
One of my favorite memes is the one where, asking, when do we find out who the kids' teachers are next year? I sure hope it's not me again.
Right. That's right.
And yes, I just feel like there's so much uncertainty. So can we talk about that actually for a second? Because that was one of the other topics that came up a lot on our poll, is just the financial uncertainty, the medical uncertainty, the worry that we're all mired in. Is there any way to speak to ourselves about this? Aside from, I think maybe the first thing and the most important thing is, yes, you're right. We just got to cut ourselves some slack. It's hard on everybody. It's nothing we could have anticipated. It's nothing we could have planned for. And yet, now that here we are, what can we do? How can we treat ourselves together?
I'm going to put on sort of my family therapy hat here and say this. The families who have access to grandparents and to elders, in the most traditional sense, the way elders would have wisdom of days gone by and how people in our community and our family have went through similar-ish experiences. It is a very powerful exercise to, and I do this in my office with anybody over the age of 60. I will ask them, can you think of another time? Because some of my clients who are over the age of 60, they're not sure what use they are to their grandkids or to their children, right, during this time. And I put forward the argument that their experience of struggle in their lives and what they have been able to observe and witness in the human condition during tough times is the greatest gift they can give their kids and their grandkids. To say, once upon a time, I don't know if you know this, but there was this big snowstorm in Winnipeg, and we didn't have power. And I noticed people, you'll watch, not 3-year-olds, but you'll see 8, 9-year-olds like listening to grandma and grandpa talking. I'll share with you a quick little story that happened to me. I was living in the Plateau in Montreal. I lived near the Hasidim, and I would get invited to the Bells. Bells was more open than Satmar and Kutch, so Bells would invite, some of us, whatever, modern-looking folk over to their house. And so I'm walking to a Shabbos meal with a bunch of Bells guys. I didn't know them, but they're walking me to the Shabbos meal, and this little Yoda-looking Chassid passes by. He's like 4'5", 99 years old. And he's like, he kind of walks by, and all these Bells guys get off the sidewalk. And I assume it's the Bells are Rebbe because they treated him like, So I asked the guy, I'm like, who was that? And they're like, we don't know. I was like, what do you mean you don't know? And they're like, he's just, he's closer to Moshe than we are. And so we treat him with a reverence that, in my community, we would put someone like that in an old age home and say, like, forget about them. It's the elders in our community that hold some of the most nourishing stories of what humans have been through, that can pass that down to the generation in terms of, what did grandma and grandpa do when they lost the store in Saskatoon because of a drought, and how did you survive? Like, I know you made the Calgary, but you didn't have any money. How'd you do it? And they tell their story. Or, I know your mother died at a very young age, and you only had dad, and he was a cab driver. And how did you do it? So it's a very nourishing experience to hear how other people survive famines or losses of business, and this, and the similarities aren't that dissimilar in terms of what people are going through now. Yes, it's true that tragedies happen, but more often than not, human ingenuity and creativity and community, especially in the Jewish community, and how people come together and build themselves up and really actually could create something stronger than before. It's a very powerful, powerful message for people when we're stuck in the mire of fear and anxiety. So our elders, and if you have access to people in your family, a great aunt, very, very powerful if you can tap that resource for some wisdom.
Thank you. I think it also allows us the gift of the long-term perspective. When I'm right here, right now, I can't imagine ever getting through it. So I need to borrow your eyes to see that actually you were in the dumps and you got through it. And maybe I'll be able to also. But I certainly couldn't have imagined it on my own.
And Rick, I'll tell you something. When you read it in a history book about someone else, it's nice. It's a nice story when someone else, but when it's your grandfather or grandmother or great aunt saying, you come from this stock, this is part of your psychological and physical DNA, this is from where you come from, that gets in there some way that someone else's story does not.
Thank you. I want to ask, first of all, everybody, please continue to send in questions and we'll get to them, but maybe could we start on the tips? Could we go through some of those practical ideas that you had? Would that work? We're going to post the tips on our Facebook, our Instagram, whatever social media we got. We're going to post the this little handout just to, it's so many times, you go to a Shalom Bayit shir, you go to a class about marriage, and you come home and you think, I knew all that. What you think is it was like some secret mystery that if you spend more time together, if you're kinder to each other, if that you'll have a happier marriage. It's not, but you need to be reminded. We all need to be reminded over and over again. And especially now when there's, so many other things that we're dealing with, we just need to take a breath. Okay, what are the basic ways that we can interact in the most healthy way?
Okay. Is there anything specific that you want to focus on, or you just want me to go through the list?
I think the idea of finding space, right? Because the topic for tonight is cooped up, and I think that it's about feeling like you don't have space, and that might be 2 people living in a mansion, and it might be 12 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment, but you feel like you're cooped up with the same person all the time, and you can't get fresh air, So I guess.
So how about this, Rivka? Why don't I share some of my favorite ones?
Okay.
I have my personal favorites, and then we can go from there. And then if there's something specific, you can ask me. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Okay. So the first one that I want to share with your audience is more about parenting. But, I think marriage is, you can see, one can assume that marriage is part of that. This is a trick I learned when I worked in sleepaway camps my whole life. I went from counselor to supervisor to therapist. A great part of my life in sleepaway camps. And one thing that we know about sleepaway camps, at least in co-ed sleepaway camps, is that once 16, 17, and 18-year-olds have hooked up and found a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, they lose interest in the kids. And so burnout hits about week 3 because you've partnered up, you're already dating someone, and you have no interest now. All your energy is gone. And so burnout hits about week 3. And that's a serious problem. And so one of the things that I discovered and I started training my staff on is if you want to avoid burnout, you can't keep coming up with new activities every single day and reinventing the wheel. You have to create something on day one that extends throughout the month. It extends throughout the month. So for example, you can wake up in the morning on Monday at camp and do baseball. And then on Tuesday, you could do hockey. And then on every day, reinventing something. But what if you started a project? What if you started a project with popsicle sticks on a Monday where you're going to build Yerushalayim with popsicle sticks? But you don't use popsicle sticks on a Monday. You start talking about the plan, so architect. So you talk about architecture and Jerusalem and the history. And then Tuesday, you extend building Yerushalayim throughout the summer. The staff get into it, okay, because it takes their ingenuity and creativity to make this exciting, and the kids follow the lead. So here's something that I'll share with you in terms of being under lockdown and stuff with your kids. Always try your best to choose child-based activities that turn you on first. So I'm going to give you a quick example of what's happening in my house, and it's working great. I am fascinated by spiders. I always have been. I can stay on YouTube and watch about spider videos all day. Spiders in Australia and spiders here and spiders there. My kids now are fascinated with spiders. They did not get born with that fascination. They see their geeky father who thinks about spiders. So what I did is I went on to Amazon, I bought an insect cage, and it has a vacuum. And so we've been vacuuming up spiders and hosting them in a big box in the backyard. And then I bought a microscope, and we're gonna look at their teeth, and we're gonna look at their legs and how they grow over months. And every day it takes up about an hour of activity because we're talking about this spider zoo we're creating in the backyard. And I love it because it's my natural interest, and my kids by extension. And so it's one way we can avoid burnout as parents in terms of extracurricular activities is keep the focus on what's interesting to you. Don't worry so much about your kid's future and if they're going to get into Harvard. Just naturally go. My wife is doing something similar. She has a green thumb. You know, she spends all her day doing psychiatry, but she has a green thumb. She's got the kids planting crap in the, I don't know what they're planting, but they're planting. We've got tomatoes and strawberries, everything's planting. And my kids they weren't bored. I have 3 rambunctious boys, but somehow her passion is transferred to them. And every day they're in the backyard and they're painting the vases or whatever they're planting stuff in. The point is, I find that parents, when they're too child focused in terms of what's best for my child, okay, it's always like bad medicine or sour medicine. But if you come at this from an opportunity, you know, I'm home anyways. What really interests me? What turns my crank? What have I always been curious about? What can I spend some money on and invest in the home? And then naturally include your kids and watch how your enthusiasm plays itself out to the kids. And you can extend that over 10 weeks. You probably can extend that over an entire summer. I just wanted to share that tip in terms of, as the summer's coming and camp is canceled, waking up every morning and trying to find something new that the kids are going to enjoy is exhausting.
And I thought themes were the work of a lazy person, but it's not. It's so interesting that you're showing me that actually theme is about development. Theme is about finding something new in the familiar, right? Like this is our theme. We're talking about Yerushalayim, but we're going to see it this way, and then we're going to see it that way, and then we're going to look at the teeth of the spider, and we're going to, you know, watch how they jump up the glass, and it's a new way of thinking about it.
And I got to tell you,
I'm saying what I'm passionate about is lying on the couch reading magazines. How do I naturally get my kids interested in that?
Well, my job here isn't to, you know, I'm agnostic when it comes to what other people's passions are. But I would press on you, Rivka, that I think you're being a little hard on yourself. I would imagine that if we had more time here, I can scratch. You know, I would be able to find an itch you need to scratch that you could bring into the home. And it's an ages and stages thing. By the way, I am not suggesting anything. The details are not important. The key here is to move the focus off the kids, because usually, by the way, our focus on kids is an anxious focus anyways. And to keep the focus on your natural passions and creativity, as you would do whether you're on lockdown or not, and then use the opportunity to flesh that out, include the kids, if possible, might not always be possible, okay, and let that naturally write itself out throughout the summer, because it's going to be a tough summer for a lot of parents who can't.
Thank you for that. That is a tip. That's got me thinking. What about if we go back to the question of finding time? So we talked about, identifying our own needs and speaking to each other. But what do I do? Are there any practical tips? Like, can I go into the living room and close the door, or the den, or whatever room has a door? And will they be okay for 15 minutes? What if I can put on, Blue's Clues, or I'm showing my age here, but Paw Patrol, whatever is currently trending. How do I, practically speaking, create those moments? And then when I have that moment, how do I enrich it so that I do feel like we've been intimate, rather than we snatched 15 minutes and all we did was argue about what we were going to do for those 15 minutes?
Yeah. So one of the terms from the family systems world is that the less anxious you are, the greater ability you have to develop and cultivate one-on-one relationships with the people that you care about. And this is true for spouse, it's true for siblings, and it's true for extended family. So one of Dr. Bowen's great contributions to psychotherapy was the cultivation of one-on-one relationships. So what's a one-on-one relationship? A one-on-one relationship with one spouse is one where you have to regulate your anxiety and calm down and be able to share what you're thinking, what your thoughts are, what your feelings are, what your hopes are, and what your fears are to your spouse without getting too caught up in their reaction about what you're saying. And then they get to do the same to you. And it's that Martin Buber I-thou experience. In most marriages, what we have is an I-it experience. Buber talked about this with God, but it's the same thing with relationships. You have a husband and a wife get together, and what do? They either talk about their neighbors, we call it a triangle. They bring in a third person. Or they talk about things, coronavirus news, the kids, even the kids. A lot of time, the way couples avoid each other is they talk about the kids.
Yes.
That's how they avoid each other.
There's so much to talk about. You feel like you can't take a break.
Rivka, it's interesting. You think that would be true. What I find in my office, though, it doesn't take much in my office to very quickly realize that it's just a scapegoat. Okay, because they keep talking about the same things. They keep talking, and I'll ask them, how often can you talk about your kid's possible ADHD diagnosis? Like, how much research do you got to actually do? And so what you find out actually fundamentally is one of the spouses in my office will say, look, the truth is, if I don't talk to my spouse about this, we don't talk about anything. And that's painful. Because I know they don't want to hear what I have to say, and I really don't want to have to hear what they say. And that's actually the problem. And what's fascinating? When you ask a couple, right? Was that true when you first met? Every single couple, maybe 1 in a million. Most couples will say, no, how did we get here? Because when we first were dating, it was, and I couldn't get enough of what their thoughts and their feelings. And something happens over time. Something gets lost over time. In all marriages, this is true for all marriages, where we create caricatures of our spouses, and it's not a true I-thou experience. So what I would say is that the exercise, should one choose to take it up, is to find a way, and it doesn't have to be for 25 minutes or 2 hours, to find a way to sit down with your spouse and say, I'd like to sit down with you, I'd like to share with you what's on my mind. And you don't talk about the weather, and you don't talk about your aunt, you don't talk about the day school teacher that's dropping the ball on English. You focus on your thoughts, your feelings, and you try to muster, and this is hard for some people, Rivka, but you try to muster the natural curiosity about, and where are you at? Where are you at right now? Like, I see you. I see your struggle. What's going on for you right now? And then when your spouse speaks, you have to regulate your anxiety. Because if you really ask your spouse what's on their mind, are you prepared to hear it?
Yeah, not in the 15 minutes we have with the door closed and I don't know what's going on the other side. You're right.
Yeah, some people would say, not even if I had 15 years. But Rivka,
but it does.
But the truth is, by the way, either you want a marriage where you're 25 years into your marriage, and the couples in the restaurant, they're staring at their soup. You know what I mean? They're not talking, or their phones, right? Either you want that kind of a marriage. We call that an anxious marriage. An anxious marriage is one where I don't share anything with you anymore because I don't believe that you want to hear it, or if I say it, you get so reactive that it's not worth saying it to you. And so the soup is more interesting than my spouse, who we have these kids with and this shared experience with. And really, it really comes down to a choice. And the truth is, look, the truth, I wish people would come to my office before things get, really rough. Unfortunately, for most people, it has to get really, really bad before they understand how far gone the marriage is, to really do that I thou work. People can stay in I it for a long, long time.
Hmm. Okay, so can we finish off, because I could talk to you for another 3 hours, but I see the time is getting late, and I wanted to maybe close off with 2 practical tips from the Gottmans. You have, I guess, related to this, right? So one thing that happens when I sit and stare deeply into my soulmate's eyes is I realize I don't even know where to start. I don't have anything to talk about, and so I know that, I mean, you could find it on any probably on any website, but I know the Gottmans have a bunch of, games, conversation starters, just questions to get it going. And they could be general open-ended questions, or sort of almost like a newlyweds game, what is your partner's, first childhood memory, or whatever it is, just sort of a getting to know you that eases you into it. And then the second piece I wanted to maybe close with is, you talk about how it creates a lot of anxiety to really listen to where another person is at, to just listen and not do anything about it. And I think you had some tips for that based on Gottman's heart rate study. And
Well,
I wonder if you could do that.
Yeah, so this again, for people who are listening, this came out of a conversation I had with Rivka. I think, Rivka, yesterday we were talking a little bit about domestic violence and when tempers flare. And by the way, tempers flare. Look, I mean, maybe our listeners tonight come from some sort of heavenly marriages and families. I know that most people on planet Earth, when they're locked down like this, tempers will flare. And the problem with tempers flaring with kids is that anxiety spreads to the kids, and kids become symptomatic under chronic temper flaring amongst parents. So one of the things that John Gottman has contributed to the world, which has been very important, his research with respect to biofeedback and how does one know when I have moved from being curious and playful and creative and interested to fight or flight. And the line is actually, when you work at it, you can get a sense of this through certain biofeedback. So his research is very granular. And I think it's helpful for clients, especially if you use an Apple Watch with a heart rate monitor. So what he studied, what he researched, and what he found is that when couples start to fight, their heart rate goes up. Okay, and he found that when your heart rate surpasses 100 beats per minute, you have something called flooding. And what he means by flooding, your brain gets flooded with anxiety or anger or sadness or fear. And when that happens, we turn into Charlie Brown's teacher. Do you remember Charles Schultz? What he did in the cartoon with Charlie Brown's teacher? Remember that teacher?
I don't know why you're cutting in and out. I don't know if we have.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Oh, apparently we have 13 seconds left on Instagram. Okay. And somehow something, yes, I see that you're switched here. Let me see if there's anybody still unmuted that is causing us to cycle in and out. No, we're good. All right, we'll continue on. We'll continue just on Zoom and finish
Hello?
up. Let me just turn my volume back up because I have it down really low. All right, can you hear me on Zoom?
Rivka?
There we go. All right, we'll finish up on Zoom.
Yeah, I think my Instagram just quit.
Yeah, mine too.
Okay. So Gottman said that what he would have is he would have his patients, his clients, wear heart rate monitors, and they would talk about a difficult decision they have to make, buying a home. And as their heart rates would go up, he would teach them how to disengage when they were about 95 beats per minute, 96 beats per minute. And there's different ways you can do this. You can be as playful as possible. You can even go, sorry, sweetie, I'm hitting 96 beats per minute. I gotta go, right? And the key would be to disengage and go for a walk around the block and bring your heart rate down to whatever your resting heart rate is. And then and here's the key, to re-engage on the hot issue at a different time when cooler heads prevail. What happens with most couples is, Rivka, you and I get into a debate. I think the kids should go to public school next year because of this crazy coronavirus. I want to save money. And you think, oh my God, Jewish education is the most important thing. Are you crazy? And we're fighting back and forth. Your heart rate's going up and up. Once we hit 100, your mouth is moving. I can't hear anything you're saying, and I'm in fight or flight. And if people don't disengage, if there's a propensity towards violence, that's when violence happens. If there's a propensity towards cutoff, that's when cutoff happens. That's when, like, spouses will stop talking to each other for
the distance, the cold.
Yeah, they stop talking. Yeah. And even kids will get involved. This is where you'll hear, unfortunately, kids will come and say, Mommy, Daddy, stop fighting, stop fighting. That's way over 100 beats per minute. And so what I would encourage people to do, it doesn't have to be heart rate, but to pay attention to when you just stop listening to your spouse and try to find some biofeed, try to find some a meter within yourself, some sort of physical thing. It could be an eye tick. It could be you swear. That's the tell. That's the tell. I'm not listening to you anymore. And here's the key, very important. You have to talk about this strategically when things are cool. It can't happen in the moment. So it has to happen at a calm time when you say, you're with your husband turns to you, and Rivka, you turn to your husband, you say, that fight we did in front of the kids yesterday, I felt horrible. I didn't feel good about that fight. I'd like to try to not do that in front of the kids. And what I'm going to do, the key is to focus on you, not him, you. What I'm going to do, the next time we're getting into it, and I feel I'm about to lose my temper, I'm just going to say, time out, and I'm going to walk away. It's not you, it's me. I'm not going to be good at that point. And I'm going to walk away, and we will come back. We will come back in 24 hours or something like that. Very, very important, or else you're going to find yourself in a Groundhog's Day of increased conflict, especially under lockdown. And it's not good for the kids. It's not good for the marriage. And just a little tip from the Gottmans.
Thank you. I love the way you described it. Like, the time to make that arrangement is not while it's happening. And, often we don't realize we need it until it's happening.
Right. And that's what people do, right? They'll be in a big fight, and the husband will say, I read in a book. I spoke, my Rav said, and like your other spouse is sitting there going, you're crazy. You're crazy. And, so, you have to have these strategic conversations the way you would have strategic conversations with your tax accountant, or if you're going to buy a business. Calm, heart rate down, so you're thinking, so you're playful, so you're curious. And look, the fact is, I'm just going to say this isn't a plug for me because my practice is pretty much full. If you need a third person, there's no shame in bringing in a third person who has experience with couples. A lot of therapists are like, I do everything. You don't want the everything. You want someone with training. You want a therapist with a good supervisor, or a clergy or a Rav who has good background. And it's very soothing to have a third person, so things get filtered through that third person and you're not talking to each other. It dials down the reactivity.
Huh. You're right. Thank you. I feel like I could go on for another hour, but I did promise that it would be at most an hour, and we're even past that, even with the technical difficulties at the morning. So and at the beginning, and I have to let you go, but I hope that we can continue to talk, and I hope that everybody gets a chance to look at the amazing tip sheet, and you'll see, when you read it, you'll see that Avrum's actually covered a bunch of those tips in the conversation that we've had already, and talking about being clear with your children, talking about, avoiding burnout by choosing activities that are of interest to you and valuable because of your passion rather than because of their future role on your child's resume, and all of those, the idea about cultivating relationships without anxiety, and of course bringing somebody else in when it's needed, and recognizing that everybody needs help sometime with something in every area of our life, and we're not afraid to ask for advice, in every other area. And this is certainly such a valuable role. And there are people who are trained, because we all need help at some point. You know, it's similar to what you were saying about the grandparents. These are people who have been through this situation or have been trained to have that perspective and can share that with you, can help you see it in a new way. So I just want to thank you so much for being here, for your wisdom, for so much that's buzzing around my head now. I know I keep saying that to you, but I just feel so energized when I speak to you. I just feel like, oh, that's so interesting. Oh, I never saw it that way. And I really am so grateful that you were here. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I just want to ask, Rivka, where can people get the, I'm not sure I would even know, where can people get the PDF sheet?
So we're going to post it on our social media, which is the Canadian Yoatzot Facebook page, the Instagram page. You can certainly reach out to ask@yoatzot.ca, and I can just email it to you directly as well. So that's
Okay.
an option. If you can't remember what it was, or you don't have Instagram, or you don't have whatever, or like me, you can't get Facebook to work, then please just go to the Canadian Yoatzot Initiative website, just ask a question, and there's a web form that will direct you to me, and I'll be happy to mail it to you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Good night, everybody.
Good luck, everybody. Bye-bye. Good health.